Welcome to the Coach Doctor podcast, a podcast where we discuss aspects of sports coaching from grassroots to grandstands. I'm your host, James Barkell, and on this podcast, we hear from academics who research coaching. We talk to coaches on the front line from development levels through to professional coaches, and we discuss other elements of successful sporting programs with experts and practitioners from a range of sports science fields, motivational psychology, strength and conditioning, and many other elements required for successful performance. If you'd like to know more about what we do at the Coach Doctor, you can visit our website, thecoachdoctor.com.au, and learn more about our services, or follow me on Instagram at thecoachdr or Twitter at James_Barkell for more regular information. In today's episode, I speak with Dr Balin Cupples. Balin is the current head of performance at the One New Zealand Warriors NRL team. Balin talks about his career moving from a youth development coach into the National Rugby League and the learnings he took along the way. We discuss his background from his Masters of Sports Coaching at the University of Sydney to his PhD research. We also discuss balancing a career in professional sport with family commitments, and Balin gives us his thoughts on what qualities stand out in the head coaches he's worked with over a 9-year career in the NRL. This episode was recorded in late 2022 in the preseason to the 2023 season, and since recording, the Warriors have gone on to record their best start in the NRL for a long time. Righto, let's get on to it. Dr Balin Cupples, welcome to the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey James, how you going? Really appreciate the opportunity to chat, mate. Looking forward to it.
Mate, do you get referred to as doctor very often?
Nah, not too often, mate. It's pretty rare. And once you get back into in the sport industry, doctor sort of sits on a couple of emails from university email, but keep it low key. And there's a few players that bring it up every now and then, but refer to Mr. at best.
Good stuff. All right, mate. First question: can you give us a quick introduction to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm currently head of performance at the One New Zealand Warriors, based in Auckland, New Zealand. Been with the club, or we've been back in New Zealand for only a few months now. Been at the club previously. This is my second stint at the club, and been in the sort of head of performance roles for the last 9 to 10 years within the National Rugby League competition.
Okay, now you got a pretty cool story involving your pathway to becoming the head of performance at the New Zealand Warriors. Can you tell me where it all began for you?
Like a lot of whether it's S&Cs or coaching background, started in the game of rugby league pretty young, and then had a brief semi-professional, professional playing career. I played sort of 4 games of NRL and understood the development, the processes and everything that went into being a professional athlete. And it was pretty short-lived, sort of retired by the age of 25. While I was playing or making that pathway, I was studying as well, and managed to complete a PE teaching degree while I was still playing and within rugby league performance environments. And then pretty much straight after finished my playing career, went into a PE teaching role. Wasn't super excited with how the playing career ended up. I was a little bit disappointed that didn't get to fulfill more time at the elite level of the game, and sort of went away from the game for a couple of years, and then focused on PE teaching, focused on other areas of my life, and then an opportunity to complete a master's at the University of Sydney where I'd studied previously through Donna O'Connor came up in conversation, and that conversation sort of spiked my interest back into rugby league. So I started making some calls from some previous connections and networks, and went back to previous clubs, which at that stage was the Tigers, and then started working part-time within their junior rep programs, which is sort of 15s to 18s, your junior elite players of the area. And for sort of 3.5 years part-time, teaching full days, and then going to 3 to 4 nights a week of training, sort of managed both strength and conditioning roles and coaching roles across their junior representative team. So got the opportunity to both be that head coach of junior representative teams, and then also look into the physical side and the strength and conditioning side of junior players. So did that for a few years, and then got the opportunity to go full-time at the Tigers, whilst sort of balancing some research motivations and passions, which we'll dive into a little bit later. But after those 3 years of sort of part-time and long hours and a very supportive family, the opportunity came up to go full-time, and I went into a pathways manager / assistant coach role full-time at the West Tigers, where at that time the under-20s level was had some media profile. There was plenty of sort of full-time positions at that level at that stage. And I was sort of managed the strength and conditioning or the performance pathway from under-20s right down to sort of under-14s across a couple of clubs involved with West Tigers at the time, and was also assistant coach to a couple of now high-level coaches in that under-20s program. So I did that for 3 years, and from there was diving back into some research and a role back into teaching, which is another sort of strong passion of mine. And the opportunity came up to interview for a head of performance role in New Zealand. And it was pretty much a phone call. Someone actually dropped out of the interview process. And I was actually only working at 20s at that stage, and got the opportunity to obviously interview for a head of performance role, which natural progression, you would say, has probably skipped a couple of steps in terms of what you'd say is ideal pathway to that performance manager role. But yeah, made the most of the interview, and then pretty much after a couple of chats to my wife and one child at that stage, I was in sort of New Zealand 3 days later. So, and then from there, as I said, to start, I've sort of been involved with the Warriors, the Newcastle Knights, and then now back at the Warriors over a sort of a 9 to 10 year high performance manager career.
Yeah, awesome. It sounds like an interesting pathway to get where you are now, or at least to get into that head of performance position initially. And when you made that jump from the Tigers, the under-20s program, to the NRL head of performance, was it a bit daunting going from that pathways program into the head of performance for an NRL team?
Yes and no. I think yes, I was obviously making the decision to relocate family and take on that challenge of managing a whole NRL squad and leading the performance department. In saying that, I was relatively, and still am relatively ambitious, and it felt like I'd had a real good grounding within junior pathways. Junior pathways is something that I'm a really big advocate of in terms of developing your repertoire, both as a coach, practitioner, and whether it's an S&C, where you get a sense of a variety of different roles within a sports performance program. So I'd spent pretty much 3 to 5 years across multiple roles within that development pathway that I felt I had a pretty good grounding and a pretty strong general knowledge across a lot of aspects of performance and coaching, along with a master's degree that I was, it's probably more excited to get across here and sort of dive straight in. And obviously learned plenty of lessons along the way. But there's always that little nerves in the back of your mind about your role and are you doing it well? But I was always at that time in my life really ready to take that opportunity and really jump straight into it.
Yeah, nice one. So tell me about the life of an NRL head of performance coach. What does an average week look like in, let's say the preseason, in-season, and potentially even post-season?
Yeah, it's a unique role. It's a really exciting role to be involved at the elite level of sport, and you to work with those elite level players and players that want to get better, and staff and coaches that are driving towards success. On the flip side, it's a really demanding role. It's an all-encompassing role. If you sort of outlined what a high-performance manager's sort of key outcomes or key responsibilities areas are, then from my perspective, you've got, obviously, you're raising the physical standards at your club, where you're trying to improve players physically that they can handle the demands of the NRL competition. And for each individual, that's very different. On top of all those physical demands, you're trying to create robust and athletes that can handle these demands week in, week out, training, competition. Our role or our responsibility areas as a performance department is one, to keep players on the field And that's always a balancing act around processes and data and making decisions daily, weekly, monthly. But that's another key role of the performance department manager. And then lastly, a key one is obviously to raise the professional standards of a club. The head coach has a huge influence of this, and obviously as a high performance manager, your primary role is to support the head coach with his philosophies and ideals and how he wants to play the game. But to raise the professional standards at a club is another key area or key responsibility of the high performance manager. So that's education around recovery, education around nutrition, diet, professional habits in terms of getting themselves to training, what they're doing away from training and away from the football field to give themselves the best shot to be the best footy players they can. So these sort of three key responsibility areas. In terms of the role itself, it's a balance between managing and coaching as a high performance manager. And this role has emerged in sort of the last 10 years as high performance has grown across sports, and the resources and the professionalisation of sport has, rightly or wrongly, provided scope to bring in sports scientists, bring in nutritionists, bring in a number of S&C professionals, physios, massage therapists. You've got all these individuals all with the same goal to get the players better and ensure that the team's humming as best possible, but trying to manage a variety of experts, bring them all together, get them on the same track is a key part of managing a high performance team. And also in terms of this role, it is a balance, and I found it a challenge over my career where due to the amount of staff that you're sort of managing and the amount of sort of roles, both admin, strength and conditioning wise, coaching wise, where you sort of balance that face-to-face coaching for yourself, because most high performance managers have either come from a coaching S&C background or a physio background, where essentially you're a practitioner and a teacher as well. So, and that's something I love to do, and I've always strived to keep myself in front of the players and in front of the playing group, where I'm not just sitting on a laptop behind the other S&C coaches and football coaches sort of managing loads and playing with overall direction of the football team. I'm on the field, on the grass, boots on, whether it's conditioning, whether it's speed, in front of the athletes, connecting on that face-to-face level as well. But that's always a challenge, balancing that. And sometimes whether it's across the season, you have to withdraw in certain areas or prioritise other things from that more executive planning type level. But that high performance manager's role is very different across sports. I've just been lucky enough in the environments I've been able to really keep a hold of that coaching element as well as that manager side as well. And then more so on the programming side, as a high performance manager, you're sort of blending or trying to make sure all the aspects of performance, whether it's physio-led, medical department, doctors, gym-based programs, speed-based, conditioning-based programs, recovery protocols, above the shoulders protocols, such as mental development or resilience development or breathing, how all these things can complement each other and how they all fit into either a weekly structure or a preseason structure. And I sort of facilitate a department where all ideas are on the table and it's highly collaborative, and regardless of your responsibility area, if you've got an opinion, which might be the right opinion, which might be the best fit for the playing group, it might come from outside your perceived sort of job responsibility. But if you've got the right idea that's going to fit this team or fit this group of players or an individual in that moment in time, then we all jump on it and we all push it forward together. So creating that sort of that leadership model and the ability to bring people together and keep them together through obviously heavy times of stress in some years and in some moments across the season is another key role of sort of a high performance manager, both on performance coaches wise and that football coaches wise as well.
Yeah, so I was going to ask that. How do you go about managing from a leadership perspective all the different staff and relationships? Because I'm sure there's egos involved, and there's some people have got really high knowledge in one area, and that might eclipse somebody else's knowledge. How do you go about managing some of those things?
It's definitely a key part of the role. That my role is the main link between coaches and performance. So, firstly, trying to build really strong connection and relatedness between the coaching and the performance teams is a really significant part of making sure both the football department and the playing group moves forward. I think that connection sometimes plays a larger role in the outcome of team performance versus all the X's and O's you do on the field and in the gym. So if you can create an environment where it's enjoyable, there's still robust conversations happening, but when there's a decision made that everybody is pushing in the one direction, then it's really important that to, I think, the outcomes of a department. In terms of leadership, first thing, I think you got to be yourself. You got to know sort of what you're like as a practitioner and as an individual, and reflect sort of what you expect in terms of planning detail. Yes, we have a few meetings, but you always come prepared for meetings. And in times of stress, those that can sort of stay on an even keel, I feel you build the most trust as an individual and in managing a team. So, and I think it's something that takes time, and you learn from experiences in terms of that sort of leadership and making sure a team stays together. You've got to build that trust by sometimes letting go. As a sort of when I first sort of started that NRL career, I probably fell into the trap of trying to micromanage too much and trying to control too much in sort of this all-consuming position when I should have, and I do now. I've got plenty of experts, as you said, within the high-performance team. You got to let them free and let them be themselves and do what they're paid to do. And there's always going to be times where you've got to ask one or two questions or ask them to rationalise why they're doing things, and you've put your perspective forward. But I think letting people own their area, have accountability in that area, really helps create that buy-in and helps them sort of makes their job meaningful.
Yeah, right. Great. So in 2009, we're going to rewind the clock a little bit here, mate.
Yeah.
In 2009, you went back to uni and you did your Masters of Sports Coaching. What were some of the key takeaways from that degree, and how did that help your coaching back then?
It was a huge decision and influence in my career. I was looking at a series of Masters, and at that stage, the Masters in sports coaching through Uni of Syd was a face-to-face course, which really appealed to me. I know in COVID times and more recently, online learning and the technology behind online learning has really made it effective, and you can still gauge plenty of meaningful interaction from that. But having the ability to sit down with coaches, whether at different stages of their career across multiple sports, it was a real appeal to me, and I got plenty out of that through connections and then just conversations, whether it was formally or informally. Was a big part of sort of how and sort of what I got out of the coaching masters, and then the general coaching masters, say, versus a strength and conditioning masters, where you might do one subject on coaching pedagogy or how to interact with players, and the rest is on sort of S&C or performance-based science and content. The general coaching masters was a real appeal, and at that stage I was doing both football and performance coaching. And I think how the masters was set up, where you had opportunities to facilitate meetings specific to you. You had to look into pathways, technology, leadership models, all these various different things that coaching pedagogy, all these different subjects, which at that stage I was unaware of the breadth of and width of how much information comes together to create an effective coach. And I think being able to see all those different things come together, have opportunities to put into practice, and have face-to-face interaction with a range of different individuals across sports, made that course really meaningful. And it obviously spiked a major passion for me life-wise in terms of coaching and rugby league, but then also on the research side as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to get to that. You finished your masters. What gave you the crazy idea to go ahead and do a PhD afterwards?
It was a few things. The masters, obviously, the more specifically, a few of the subjects within the masters around athlete development, and at that stage, really enjoyed some of the writing and diving into some of the research within athlete development. Reading a lot of sort of non-fiction at the time, where some like highly popular books like The Talent Code, Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin, The Goldmine Effect, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, all these things around talent development and expertise development. I just really dived into it. And from my own background, coming through development pathways as a player, and at that stage involved as a coach within rugby league development, it just really resonated with me and sort of drew me in. So also at that time, the under-20s competition within rugby league, as I mentioned, was getting plenty of media, rightly or wrongly. And that was sort of that final step on the rugby league pathway to sort of went from NRL as the top level down to under-20s. And there was plenty of good things happening, and there was some not so great things happening in terms of what was happening to some of these players that potentially got a bit too much and ahead of themselves a little bit early in their career. So there was a number of factors, along with the stage in my life, the opportunity to work with two highly supportive and recognised supervisors in Steve Cobley and Donna O'Connor within the field, and to give something back to the game I'd been involved with at that stage for probably 20 or so years now, probably 30 plus. There's a range of sort of things that come together to put me on that path. And it's obviously, as you know, James, it's not a decision you take lightly. And family was a part of that as well. And it took me down a PhD path. It was a very long, comprehensive path, but really excited by the outcomes of it, and what I learned about myself and what I learned about the sort of research area.
And I imagine it would have been pretty tough balancing all your work commitments with your PhD commitments, especially once you got that job in New Zealand the first time. Yeah.
As I said, you learn a lot about yourself in terms of time management and how important it is to balance family, social, and then also your academic goals. And I'm honest, you need probably it's a little bit selfish in terms of you got a passion in multiple areas, and lucky enough to combine both research and work full time as a practitioner. The late nights and the start and stop periods across the PhD, and sort of changing both countries and jobs probably 4 or 5 times within the 8-year period it took me to complete it. Was definitely a struggle, but it's an opportunity for growth as well.
Yeah, great job. So, mate, could you give us a brief explanation into what your research was about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, that sort of sparked my interest around expertise development and talent development. And a lot of the research at the time around talent development environments, around terms such as Erickson's deliberate practice, a number of hours, and Cote's, you've had previous guest on the podcast, around his development model of expertise, along with all these case studies that were starting to emerge looking at environments and what these environments were doing to enhance talent development, which is to adapt and prepare talented players for hopefully future growth and future success within sports. And the research was saying it's highly context specific, and the influence of the environment, both directly and indirectly, on these individuals was highly unique. So to me, there was an opportunity to explore rugby league in that area. And there's a little bit coming out within sort of Scandinavian sports and media around sort of football academies in the UK, and there was some research there. And so, okay, I'm going to jump into this and explore rugby league, and what is it that essentially helps or creates a rugby league player at the elite level. So, the PhD sort of grew as it went and flowed from sort of an information gathering study or start into some case studies, and then into excitingly like a intervention or a practitioner intervention. So, exploring the pathway or elite athlete pathway within rugby league.
Okay, and what were some of the findings? Did you have anything come out that was glaringly different or surprising, or did it just sort of confirm some of your previous thoughts?
Multiple. Obviously, findings across obviously the time you put in the series of studies. Each study for mine sort of evolved into the next. The first study was like looking at developmental profiles in relation to practice play, what 225 NRL players did across their development pathway. And obviously loads of data and putting that all together, and the notion of a linear pathway and only one pathway success, which is now across, I think it's recognised that there's multiple pathways to success, but in rugby league and within the representative structure that was currently at the time, we identified that from our sample, 40% of the players we that fulfilled filled in the questionnaire came from a delayed investment pathway. So they were starting in the representative pathways from 17 to 20. So that means you've got 40% of people that started from a more intense, more training, higher physical training at a younger age, that in those later years of adolescence, other people took their positions within representative teams. So to me, that was the first I thought that was how it was going to be, but to get that reinforcement from the data and around that, despite not being selected in early rep teams, that opportunities that still arise down the path. And these opportunities and the efficacy of training at later age groups, they'd had an accelerated development period in that later adolescent stage. So, which was exciting and encouraged both coaches and players to keep playing and to widen that pyramid at the basis, and that still opportunities are available down the path. So, that was really exciting for me. And I think that was a really strong message to both players and coaches, that you don't have to make those early junior representative teams to lose your shot at becoming, whether it's your dream or your goal to get to higher levels within the sport. So that was sort of that first part of the PhD. And out of that, we started looking at, okay, what are some of the key environments within rugby league athlete development and school-based talent development environments and school-based sports specialisation programs within Australia. And there has been a rise, both anecdotally, media-wise, and in research across different countries around sports schools. So we looked at a number of sports schools which had a strong history in producing rugby league players, and looked at the coherence to some of the effective talent development environment information that was out there. And we found a really strong coherence to some of the things that environments are doing internationally and across sports that are assisting players to safely and positively move through a development pathway. So aspects like a highly supportive coaching environment, just in terms of some of the environmental features. So a highly supportive environment, how much time these coaches / teachers have for these players, how much structure and behaviour, high behavioural expectations. You've got essentially players arriving for training 2 hours before school, and these are just players that are creating these habits early, getting up early, being there for gym sessions, for field sessions. The amount of care and the amount of just appreciation from the players. So the part of the research process was interviewing ex-players, current players and current staff, and just how appreciative current players and ex-players were in describing, well, they described it as a family. These school environments showed how much care the coaches showed to them in developing them both as both football players and as people. The sort of the autonomy created within these environments, where coaches created an environment where it was highly supportive, but gave players responsibility over their own development and gave them opportunities for feedback, opportunities to one-on-one learning. And these are essentially coaches that aren't full-time, they're teachers through the day, and to have that type of environment at that level, again, sort of shows why certain individuals come out of those environments and then are a little bit better prepared for those transitions and challenges that come after. So I found plenty of strengths within these school-based environments, and then also found some opportunities for improvement or opportunities to add to how strong their programs are. The two main themes that come out of the research were the management of training loads. As you know, as across multiple sports in adolescence, that you're managing club, you're managing representative, you're managing school teams. Each of these teams have coaches and managers and selectors and people with invested interest in you as a player, and individual players and young players coming through trying to navigate these conflicting demands can be a challenge. And we found that across even the sporting school programs, some of the players felt torn. They felt like they couldn't talk to key people, or maybe didn't have the maturity or social skills yet to have these conversations. And it was a concern which could ultimately obviously lead to injury and or become disenchanted with the game. So that was that training load management, and then also psychosocial skills and coping with this. Coping with all these increased demands, coping with the pressure of making it to that next level, having the skill set, not just to learn through experience, but to also have some practical skills to goal set, cope with certain things when you miss a team, or manage a poor exam result. We've got all these groups of emerging players coming through, and they're tactically and technically, physically developing and getting plenty of tuition and quality coaching around that. But on the holistic side and the psychosocial side, we found really big opportunities to add to how comprehensive some of these talent development programs are. And that sort of led into which was the exciting sort of final part of the PhD, was a practical intervention focusing on coping and psychosocial skills. So based on obviously my career as a practitioner, I was lucky enough to embed it within an NRL club, and had some really strong outcomes. So the intervention was a series of meetings, lectures, group activities with an under-20s group across a preseason, six sessions. The sessions involved myself as lead researcher. It also involved a current player that was just emerging with the NRL. It involved 2 senior NRL players. It involved an NRL assistant coach and welfare staff at the club. So it was a really embedded intervention. It was really comprehensive in terms of to have the club recognise how important it is to sort of promote this skill set within players. And it had some really strong outcomes, both research and anecdotally within the club. So focus was on obviously increasing coping skill sets, whether problem, emotion based coping versus disengagement based methods, and then also giving them some simple tools to be able to deal with certain pressures, and then also giving them an awareness of, okay, what's coming next on my pathway. So to have senior players really resonated with players, these elite junior players coming through, to have a NRL head coach and to come down and tell them about what's going to change when they get to the elite level. Both to me and some of the feedback, qualitative feedback post, which was sort of 3 months post the intervention, it was meaningful, which was really rewarding for myself in terms of the work done PhD wise. And I was just excited with the progress of the different components of the PhD all coming together and leading to something that, okay, this can be something that can be used within clubs to hopefully make a change and make those challenges and transitions a little bit easier for some guys that may or may not make it to the higher levels.
Yeah, great. And I'm assuming that that research that you went through has helped inform and develop your own, I guess, work in the NRL now. And you mentioned you've developed a bit of a program. Is that something that other clubs can utilise, or is it something that you've got in your sort of arsenal or tool bag that you can bring out at the clubs that you work at, or how's that sort of working?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think obviously publication-wise, the details around the intervention and is out there for obviously to grab and integrate, and it was always something that I felt could sort of be packaged up and integrated. I know the NRL's doing, as an organisation, doing plenty of great work around their youth and making sure that they've got certain skills and are able to deal with both life and sporting demands as they come through that pathway. But yeah, the short answer, it's not packaged up enough to be able to sort of go out and take it to other clubs. Could easily be done, but obviously the time demands of what my 9 to 5 or more likely 6 to 6 out of performance job most days really sort of limits where that program could go. But by all means, where how valuable it could be at that elite youth level, and that's just not within rugby league, but the premise of it. I think there's some opportunity there for sure.
Hi listeners, a quick halftime note before we continue. If you haven't looked at the Elite Performance Journal's Coach's Notepad or the Athlete Journals yet, make sure you get onto their website, eliteperformancejournal.com, and check them out. The Athlete Journals and Coaching Notepads are designed by elite athletes and coaches and are a great tool to add to your team's arsenal. Listeners to the Coach Doctor podcast have access to a 20% discount on APJ products by using the code word Coach Doctor, which is all one word and all in lowercase, to receive the discount when you're at the checkout. Okay, let's get back to the interview. In terms of getting that first role in the NRL and moving over to New Zealand, what were some of the major changes from going from where you were at the time to working with the senior NRL side?
Firstly, I think a lot stays the same as well, like as a practitioner. So your experience and knowledge as a coach, your ability to connect with people and interact with people, who you are as a practitioner, to be able to sort of create belief or buy-in into your program. So that essentially stays the same whether you're at the developmental level or you move yourself or have aspirations to move into the elite level of professional sport. The key difference is obviously the resources available. So as I touched on at the start, high performance teams are now 6 to sort of 10 people, which you have all this information, you've got all this technology available, whether it's GPS, gym aware metrics, coaching, subjective information coming in, all these information sources, medical information, doctor information that you've got to manage. And you can get lost in the details. And as I touched on earlier, that my first couple of years ahead of performance where you have all these people that you're managing, which I think to start with, I was pretty happy with how the people side of things went. But myself personally diving too much into, say, GPS, which is sort of my first experience with it when it was in its early days. And as a practitioner, probably went too far by the numbers and probably lost a little bit of the art of looking at the group and managing the group, what I was seeing. And that comes with experience as well. So that was definitely a change moving from development to that NRL level. Also, you have to put your faith in other people because of the amount of responsibility areas going from developmental level to the elite level. You have to put trust in other people to do their jobs. And that's a skill set, and keeping people in line with sort of the direction of the performance department, also keeping them challenged and also making sure they're challenging both myself and enjoying what they do. That's another thing. I think moving from development to NRL, there's that management side. And obviously the pressure at that development level. It's a teaching-based, I think, predominantly teaching-based role where you're not judged, because I think how you judge a performance coach is highly variable, highly subjective. There's a couple of articles by Kevin Till and colleagues in terms of how to evaluate a performance coach, but it's not clear cut as a coach versus just looking at numbers and players that progress at that development level. If you can establish strong coaching foundations and then moving well, and you're getting a few players through to that higher levels that are handling that level, I think it's you've done a really good job. Whereas at the NRL level, the pressure increases in relation to obviously keeping players on the field, the physicality of being able to handle the demands of NRL each week, to get through a preseason, to keep your best players playing. And it's something that's all absorbing, especially early in your career, that pressure around making sure you're balancing push and pull in terms of making sure you continue to push these players to play in the best rugby league competition in the world versus making sure that, okay, they're learning, they're still fresh enough, and they're not going to break. And I probably took a little bit, dived into that pressure too much early in my career, and probably took too much on my sort of shoulders in terms of responsibility for things. As you know, in professional sport, there's plenty of things, and even more so when we dive into the Warriors, out of your control. And you can't absorb that. You can't accept responsibility. And I know in the early couple of years, moving from development to the elite level, it's something I battled with, where I'd take whether it's a soft tissue injury or it was a poor training performance, I'd take it personally and I'd dwell on it. Whereas now I'm a lot more experienced, a lot more comfortable that, yes, there's always going to be challenges and things that go wrong. But how much emotional control you have over yourself as a practitioner, I think it's a learned experience, and obviously relying on individuals around you is important. That ability to enjoy what you actually do is definitely something that I've developed as I've sort of journeyed across my NRL sort of performance career.
I'm sure it must, you must pinch yourself sometimes when you think you're working in the NRL, and I've seen you on Fox Sports or on Channel 9 from time to time, running water out and giving some instructions. So I mean,
just a water boy. Yeah,
it must be pretty cool being involved and still finding yourself on the field, not as a player necessarily, but you're still in the heat of the battle there with the guys. So must be enjoyable.
Yeah, big time. It's the passion for what I do, and as although there's been some challenging times, both career-wise and maintaining jobs, and challenging times on the field, wins and losses and injuries, still highly passionate about the role I'm in, and very grateful for the opportunity I get to work with like-minded people and people that want success, and then the amount of strong relationships I've developed and gained across my career, whether it's with other coaches and performance staff, and just obviously the players, to be able to work with people with that much ambition and that dedicated to their sport and want to be elite. It's a very privileged role, and definitely don't take it for granted.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess from that, we know that success is not linear, and you've probably personally had a lot of setbacks along the way. How have you experienced any setbacks in your career, and how have you overcome them?
I think just like as a player, we spoke about with player trajectories through to their journey to become an elite player. There's always ebbs and flows, and there's always challenges, and it is it's a very cutthroat industry, especially at the elite level. And coaches change and performance managers change. Unfortunately, in rugby league, every year there's sort of 5 to 6 clubs that change key roles, and it's the nature of winning and the business. And I've been across my sort of 9 years of had that head performance role within the NRL. I've sort of been with 6 coaches in 9 years. On top of that, you've sort of worked with, if you add in assistant coaches, there's 20 to 22 coaches in total that you've worked with across 9 years. And rightly or wrongly, you develop relationships. And I think it's a really good thing that there's probably an undervalued and probably undersold, I think, in terms of performance staff. And then especially in my role in sort of that head of department type role, your relationships with coaches are critical, both on a day-to-day training, move the football club and the football team forward level, and then also career-wise. The relationships that you build and the connections you build with football coaches are the things that are going to keep you in jobs long-term. And so going back to sort of my own pathway, where after 3 years at the Tigers, new head coach came in, they had a realignment of sort of their pathways, and then sort of because I was full-time in that role, I sort of got offered a part-time role, which again, probably wasn't going to be able to do and still do what I needed to do family-wise and research-wise. Opportunity to come up at the Warriors, which I jumped into for 4 years. And then across that, I'd sort of worked with 2 head coaches in there, and then things in and out of your control and lessons you learn after sort of 4 years at the Warriors, an opportunity to come up at Newcastle, and had 2 coaches that I worked with at Newcastle, and had really good, strong success with both coaches. But then that tenure come to an end for a number of reasons, and then the opportunity to come back to the Warriors. So across 9 years in professional sport, I've essentially had 3 times where the situation hasn't worked out, and sort of not diving into each one and the rationale between each. But yeah, there's always things you learn from them in terms of the challenges, and each of those big changes career-wise were probably didn't seem like it at the time, but they've probably ended up to be the most positive aspects of my career in terms of the next opportunity that come off the back of it, in terms of the new relationships developed, and then some of your obviously individual growth. So each of those times you're going to sort of, and it can be hard when you're in the high pressure zone of week in, week out rugby league. And I've been at clubs which is sort of, for a number of reasons, sort of been in that bottom 8 of the competition. And they're more likely than sort of your top sides to have high staff changeover. That you sometimes just have to step back and have a look at, like I said before, be grateful for the opportunities you've had, take what you can out of learning from it, and then obviously maintain, which has been a big thing for me, is I've always maintained an inner confidence that I'm good at what I do, and next opportunity will come. So I think across just in the game in general, there's always going to be ups and downs career-wise just as a player, and how you deal with them, along with a highly supportive family and more so a supportive wife that's keep making sure you stick to your own values and your own philosophies about why you do things, and stand by sort of what you do, and have full sort of confidence and trust that you're going to put your best self forward and do a good job and move a club forward physically. Things that come out of obviously the darker or the more challenging times across a career. And it's probably didn't realise stepping into it back in 2015, just obviously how much transition actually happens. As I said earlier, I was probably more excited and ambitious and ready to take the career and run with it. It changes all the time. There's no there's limited security within especially high performance sport, but there's plenty of rewards as well, and there's plenty of moments that you definitely wouldn't change.
You mentioned earlier on supportive family, and we spoke about it before we started. You've gone from Sydney to New Zealand to Newcastle, back to New Zealand. You've got 2 children at the moment.
Yeah.
How's that been, managing that, making sure that your partner's happy, and trying to manage everything else that's going on in your life outside of being a high performance manager?
Yeah, as I said, throwing a PhD across a number of those years as well, and highly appreciative of sort of what my family does for me, or lets myself sort of pursue my own goals and continue to do that across multiple clubs and multiple living arrangements. And daughter just finished primary school. She's been to 4 primary schools, and she's a resilient one and did extremely well. But I wouldn't be able to sort of live the high, when I say high stress, it's a good stress. It's a stress you lean into because you're passionate about what you do and you're passionate about getting people better. But it is a time demanding and pretty stressful job. And my wife and the kids are normally the ones that, I've got a lot better at this, in terms of not taking elements of your work home. And it is a challenge considering how encompassing this role is. But you got to make sure you give your best to them as much as you give your best sort of each day to the players and the coaching group. So, very, very lucky in that way.
And I'm just going to go back to some time after your first stint at the Warriors. You came back to Newcastle. The club had been going through some difficult stages in terms of where they'd been finishing on the ladder. But 2020-21, the club returned to play finals footy after some pretty lean years. What do you think were some of the main, aspects or reasons behind their improvement?
I think whenever you arrive at a club, you've got to acknowledge where the playing group and the coaching staff and the previous performance staff and how they've made growth within the group. I think the Knights and even that first time with the Warriors, you still learn plenty from not getting the results. So I think the Knights, when we arrived there, they were ready for obviously some new standards, some different training methodologies. And then, yes, you'd like to say that the changes in the performance team and the new staff come in made a big difference. But I think across most clubs, timing of when you arrive at clubs in relation to playing squad, the quality of playing squad, the senior players coming in, the work the current coach or the new coach brings in. It's not just coming in and jumping in and creating it. There's always plenty of work done previously that you sort of jump on the shoulders of. At Newcastle, when I arrived back there, they just grabbed a couple of senior players, more experienced players from other clubs. Tim Glasby was one of them. David Clemmer was the year after. These players, which is great for me on that professional culture side of things, which was one of my key sort of areas to raise within the Knights, was these players changed the processes and changed the professional expectations of the place. And I think there's some recent State of Origin players at the Knights that potentially wouldn't have got to that level of playing if it hadn't been for some of these new recruits coming into the club and showing them how to train, how to prepare, and how to be better footballers in terms of the time and the planning it takes to do that. So that was one element of it. Obviously, new staff coming together, the collaboration between staff, both performance and coaches, new information into the place definitely adds to a group moving forward. The details and the different standards that both the first coach I worked with and the second coach I'd worked with, which both had success at different times, were both highly unique in terms of how they approach things, but they got a response out of the group. So the group at that stage were ready to be pushed, were ready to train to a certain standard, have higher sort of expectations of themselves, and we ended up getting results on the field. So I think it's hard to put it on one or two factors, but the new information, certain players coming in, new coaches with new ideas, higher standards, and higher levels of planning sort of all come together to work with a team that had been starved of success and were really passionate about doing something for a special town like Newcastle.
Just to finish off, mate, you've worked, and you mentioned this before, you've worked alongside a number of head coaches, a number of assistant coaches. Without naming, or feel free to name if you want to, what are some standout behaviours or characteristics that you've witnessed from head coaches that you think are really, really important and make them sort of a really strong coach?
The first one is, I think, self-awareness. So their experience, they've got obviously a strong knowledge level across multiple areas of performance, whether it's your high performance side, your coaching, your X's and O's, then you've got your leadership side and managing people, because that head coach, even managing media, it's an all-encompassing role. The coaches I feel that have been most effective in their role is they're very self-aware of where their strengths and weaknesses are. And they're able to verbalize that and make sure they've got the right people around them to help them in other areas. So being aware of your own self strengths and weaknesses as a coach is a big one. I've been really not surprised, but coming from a research background where you attend conferences and you hear some really good speakers, and a lot of the head coaches I've worked with in terms of getting up in front of a group and delivering messages and getting players buy into the direction of things have been exceptional. So that ability to stand up in front of a group, really present well, like pass on judgments, deliver like key meaningful statements, and to make them players respond to them was just it's something I've been really not surprised with, but it's been something that's really stood out to me over the sort of 9 years, just how well coaches now are so well versed in nailing a presentation to the group, and they do it often, and it's an important facet of coaching. A lot of the coaches that I feel are good skill sets on that sort of head coach level is they ask why. So the amount of conversations or meetings I've had where they challenge me or they ask my opinion, or they're always curious and they're seeking new information. They're asking why we're doing things. I think it's a great way to build connection, and it also shows that they're sort of they're really interested in all aspects of performance, and they want to make sure that they're across most areas that are going to drive the football team forward. Probably the other two or three that I think head coaches that have really been good in the environment and for the football team is they're aware of their influence on the group. So how they walk in, their body language, and I don't put myself in their shoes because obviously the stress I go through day to day versus them is not in the same realm as a head coach. But how the best coaches are some of the most I'd say higher level coaches that I've worked with, they're aware of how they can shape an environment, whether it's through a joke or whether it's through their level of enjoyment or a smile or how they walk into a room, just being aware of that influence, because it's a significant influence in terms of how they shape not just a footy team, but a club in itself. So that's another really a big one for me. And then along with that stress component of working with X amount of coaches across my career, and seeing how plenty of individuals, including myself, deal with highly stressful situations, the ones that can still find enjoyment in what they do and still maintain connection with staff and players. And it is like this, it's a career where incomes, families, relocation, it's on the line. And in NRL, it's annually. And for individuals to sort of rise above it and still be themselves when stuff's falling around them. And I can't put myself in their shoes, but have that much respect for those people that are able still to maintain connection, maintain their role, and still keep pushing forward with the amount of stress that they're under.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that. That's some really good information there that, coaches who are listening can understand some of the aspects of that elite environment. Any potential, performance managers of the future as well, understanding the great role that it is. It's not just a glorified strength and conditioning coach. There's a lot more to it. So, mate, I really appreciate your time. Before we go, I know it's very early days. You're back at the Warriors now. How are you guys looking for 2023?
Yeah, really excited. We've been back at it now. We're into week 5 of preseason. Not going to dive into some of the challenges that the Warriors faced in recent years. We've had like a really strong reset now being back in Auckland. Got new coach on board and new staff across the board, and we're only 4 weeks in, but the club, it's just got a different feel about it. We're not going home to empty houses, and there's not people away from their families, and there's not things going on off the field that nobody can control now. There's no excuses, and we're all moving forward. So reconnecting with Auckland and New Zealand, and getting out to the wider country next year with games, really excited to do that again. And again, one of the appeals of working for the Warriors is that cultural element to New Zealand and the Māori and Pacifica cultures you have over here. It's a really special place, and at this stage, a few boys with a little bit of more work to do than others, but we're excited by where we're moving at this stage, and still plenty of work to do, but really excited to be back in Auckland, and looking forward to what this group can put onto the field next year.
Awesome. Well, Balin, best of luck for 2023 with the Warriors, and then whatever lays ahead in the future. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and having a chat with me.
No, thanks, James. Really appreciate it, mate. All the best.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
It's pretty impressive that Balin has managed a career in high-performance sport and been able to complete his PhD concurrently. I met Balin back in 2008 for the first time, and it was clear back then that he was driven to succeed in the NRL, and it's great to see him doing so well now. Some of the key takeaways from this conversation was that through his research, Balin discussed the importance of highly supportive coaching in talent development environments. Athletes describe these environments to be like family, with coaches who cared for them both personally and as an athlete. And some of these actions included time for one-on-one feedback and the coach having time to get to know the athlete individually. Another factor Balin discussed was that early representative success did not necessarily determine long-term career success. A high number of NRL footballers came on in their late teens, and these results reinforce that opportunities can arrive if players can keep focused, cope with disappointment, and develop strong psychosocial skills. And as coaches, we need to continue to communicate this message to encourage young athletes to stay in their sport. Finally, some of the key aspects for head coaches that Balin discussed were that great coaches have the ability to nail a presentation or talk in front of a group. They can deliver the message. Another one was that these coaches kept asking why, and they stayed curious in order to learn and to grow. And then being aware of their influence on the group, as well as being able to deal with highly stressful situations and maintaining connections within the group during tough periods. I think this one really aligns with the discussion I had with Daryl Gibson on an earlier podcast. Well, that brings us to the end, and as usual, I hope you've enjoyed this episode and learned something. Please share it on your social media, share it with friends, like it and leave a review if you can. If you'd like to hear on any specific topics, please get in contact and let me know. In the meantime, keep learning.